I'm a Nintendo guy, have been since 1991, and I didn't own any Sega console until 2005 or so. Now, I've owned all of the main ones at least once, and my basic opinion is that the Master System was pretty meh, except for Phantasy Star. Mega Drive was great, but not as great as the Super Nintendo. The Dreamcast was very good, but not really the game reincarnation of Jesus that some people seem to see it as. The Sega Saturn I've always been the least familiar with. However, when I was in Japan last year, I bought a Saturn in an effort to explore its game library in search for unknown gems and the well-known ones as well. In Europe and America the Sega Saturn was always black, but in Japan it was grey and white. I got the white one because it looks nicer. I got enough grey from PCs during the 90s and mid-2000s to last a lifetime. I like the controller. The D-pad, even though it's one of those round ones, it feels good to use. Slightly better than the Mega Drive D-pad and a lot better than the Master System D-pad. The shoulder buttons are less satisfying though. I'm not a fan of the clicking sound they make. I also have the 3D controller that was made for Nights into Dreams. It has an analog stick, but it came out about a month after the Nintendo 64, so it's not the first analog stick ever, but it is the first to use a ball, so to speak, instead of the literal stick that the Nintendo 64 had, and as such it doesn't degrade as fast. It also has triggers instead of shoulder buttons, which is the standard now. I'm not sure if it's used in any games on the Saturn like they use them now though. Finally, it places the analog stick above the D-pad, which is something that other controllers except PlayStation copied after this. The Saturn also has the best CD player I've ever seen on a console, with lots of options and a nifty visualization with a spaceship. Anyway, I have 11 games right now, and these are they. Sonic Jam, a compilation of Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. And in any of the games you can choose to use any of the Sonic & Knuckles lock-on features, which is cool, like using the spin dash in Sonic 1. It also has Sonic World, which essentially is a little hub world you use to get to the bonus materials like music and video clips. The intro to Sonic CD doesn't sound as good from the Japanese version.
You can go again. Don't fall behind. Say don't be late. Destination heaven.
Panzer Dragoon 2 is a shooting game. At first it looks like a simple drag the cursor shooter, until I realized you could press L and R to look and shoot in other directions. I don't know anything about this game really, but I have to assume that eventually the dragon you're riding on gets to fly, which I'm looking forward to. Shin Shinobi-Dan, or Shinobi Legions as it's known over here, is the 4th game in Sega's ninja series. A ninja that is clearly wearing some kind of hockey padding. Oh yeah, and the game has lots of FMV scenes and it's made up of digitized characters. But it's the kind of FMV game the Philips CDI and such could only dream of. It's hard as well. Nights into Dreams is a weird game. You start out as a kid in a dream, then you get hit and lose your balls, essence or whatever that is. Then you go into this gazebo and turn into knights, who then fly around through rings in loops, collecting orbs and stars and blowing up Metroids. After blowing up a couple you go to the goal and get a bad ranking. But still, it's a pretty relaxing and harmonious game, and definitely better with the 3D controller. Clockwork Knight is a platformer made by Sega, starring Pepero Chow the Clockwork Knight. The game feels like Toy Story and your weapon is a Keyblade, 6 years before Kingdom Hearts. Clockwork Knight for the Japanese Sega Saturn is Clockwork Knight 2 in the US and Europe, which is odd. A pretty fun platformer I think, but I have no idea what to do with these eggs.
Biohazard
is a great game, as we know. I think this Saturn version was the first time that the auto-aim was used, 2 years before Resident Evil 3. It also has a battle mode and an exclusive hunter enemy. Although the text and menus are in Japanese, all the wonderful dialogue is still in English.
Kenneth was killed too, maybe by this creature.
You already know about Capcom Generations 2 since my video about the Makaibura games. Street Fighter Real Battle on Film is what we know as Street Fighter the movie the game over here. A Street Fighter game like most others, except that it used digitized actors and graphics of course. At least it looks like they got the actors from the movie to get digitized, unlike for example Batman Forever on Super Nintendo. Bug 2 is the sequel to Bug, a 2.5D platform game with a zany sense of humor. Not as bad as Bubsy, but still it's the parent that the developers tried to be funny here. The game itself is okay, but not exceptional. Assault Suit Lanos 2 reminds me a lot of Cybernator, which was named Assault Suits Valken, but it's really a sequel to Assault Suits Lenos, or Target Earth, on the Mega Drive. It's pretty good. You can use thrusters while jumping, use some kind of boost to slide around, and use a shield to shield yourself. I have an Action Replay memory/sheet cartridge, which I mainly use to play my only European game, which is easily deduced by the big case. Anyway, it's
Sega Rally Championship.
I played this at the arcades a lot, and the home version, while not as pretty, plays well. And I recommend the 3D controller over the regular one. I usually lose the races, but that's okay, because the game has the most uplifting game over screen ever.
Game over, yeah!
There's also the spine cards, another Japanese quirk. Plenty of games that came in CD cases had these, but although I kind of liked them, they seem pointless, and really only serve to annoy collectors, as they're quite often missing unused games. Which is understandable because unlike the manual, they go on the outside of the case, and after you take off the plastic, you don't really know where to put them. Anyway, for the future, I have plans to get Sonic 3D Blast, because I think it's a nice little game that the 3D controller would work nicely with. House of the Dead, Virtua Cop and the light gun that goes with it would be nice too, but I still don't know that much about the Sega Saturn game library, other than it has a lot of fighting games, a lot of Japanese RPGs, dating sims like Sentimental Graffiti, games that you can't really call games such as Virtua Fighter CG Library or whatever it's called, and that Panzer Dragoon Saga is super expensive. So feel free to recommend me some games.